Building a base is an enormous and essential part of Dune Awakening, but it's not perfect. Indeed, the building system does need a few improvements, and today I'm going to tell you how, why, and what Funcom could do to make it even better. Let's get into it. Dune Awakening's building system already makes quite a few welcome concessions and quality of life changes to the usual survival building format. I've spent over 5,000 hours building in Conan Exiles, Funcom's last game, and they've definitely made a net improvement overall to an already fairly good system, but there are a few things I think they could do to make Dune's building mechanics even better. Firstly, one that has been raised before, snapping foundations. When you first throw down that Sub-Fief console, you've got a limited area to work within, and I actually think that's a good thing. However, what isn't so good is that it's a nightmare to maximise that space efficiently. Trying to put your foundations right in the corners to get as much space as possible is just not intuitive at all, so Funcom should add the ability to snap foundations to a grid within your Sub-Fief land claim. To be clear, I don't think this should be a mandatory thing. I think it should be optional, as you never know when somebody wants to be able to free place foundations. From what I've read, I think Funcom already knows about this particular piece of feedback and are likely planning to implement it, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this come into the game at some point in the future, which will make maximising your space just much easier. My second improvement might be a little bit of a controversial one. I think you should be able to both repair your build and fill in holograms from the Sub-Fief console. Now firstly, let me be clear, I don't think you should be able to repair your Sub-Fief in a PvP zone. I don't want people to be able to sit inside their base during a PvP raid and just repair until attackers get bored, so disable or severely slow that down in PvP. As for the filling in holograms portion, I think that should be mostly good. It does lose some of the process of physically building everything yourself, which I think is an important part of the building process in general, but also if you've already laid out all your holograms, you don't actually gain a lot from taking 20 minutes walking around filling in green projections. Again, I could see this one being a little controversial, so do let me know what you think. Personally, I think especially the repairing function is relatively harmless in PvE. It just aids to streamline a process that otherwise can be quite frustrating. I'm not sure if Funcom would add this improvement in, but I think it would be a fairly good quality of life feature for builders. Improvement number 3 is lifted directly from Conan Exiles, and frankly it's something that I'm surprised isn't already in the game. That is direct replacement, being able to replace one piece with another. For example, it would allow you to replace a Chome shelter foundation with an Atreides foundation without having to move workstations or manually delete the original foundation itself. I recently upgraded my base from Chome shelter to Atreides stronghold, and not being able to directly replace foundations, walls, roofs and so on was honestly a bit of a pain. I'm really surprised this wasn't ported over from Conan Exiles, but I do think there's a chance of it being added in the future, so long as of course steps are taken to prevent it being abused in PvP. Improvement number 4 is mainly a decoration focused one that is, well, Lightier lights. With an advanced Sub-Fief and no staking units, you have a limit of 30 lights in your base, but no matter how much you increase that limit, the feedback I've read seems to be the same across the board. Most lights in the game are just too dim to have a real effect, and you can see that in my base. The ground floor is kinda well lit, not really, but the first and second are just dark and honestly a bit grim. I feel like most of the lights in this game are a bit too dim, even the large overhead ceiling lights, so I would like to see them brightened up and improved to make it easier to light a build while staying within your lighting limit. To be fair, I think there is some sort of built-in thing here. I've noticed that if I place enough lights then the entire room seems to brighten up, but I'm not sure exactly how that works or if it's even intended. Regardless, myself and many other players would quite like a well-lit base, so improvements to the lighting options are needed. Lastly, the 5th improvement is fixes to the staking unit system, most notably the vertical stakes. Currently, if you add a vertical staking unit to your base, it extends your land claim vertically both up and down. That's great if you're built on a platform or a cliffside, but if you're on flat ground, half of that staking unit space is essentially wasted. Instead, I'd like to be able to choose which direction the staking unit applies in, After placement, throw up a quick dialogue that asks if we want the extra space above or below our current land claim. It's as simple as that, really. More options are always great, and this fix would help greatly for people who have built on the ground level and don't want to waste half of each vertical staking unit they use. Those are my 5 improvements, but there's one last thing that I had an idea for a little while ago, and it's something that I think could be pretty cool, and I've called it Solido Studio. My idea for this would basically be a mid-game build planning utility, an interface in which players can examine, plan and blueprint their builds with a free cam perspective. Ideally, players would create and interact with an item or a projection or a workstation to enter the studio, in which they can move and manipulate the camera and pick from their unlocked build sets to essentially prototype a build without having to do it out in the world. This design could then be saved in the studio and imprinted onto an inserted Solido replicator, which can then be either constructed or sold on the exchange. On the positives, I think Solido Studio would make build planning far easier. You don't have to deal with Sardaukar, sandstorms, heatstrokes, etc. It increases creativity via ease of use, and it works with the replicator system without removing the need for players to go to a social hub to sell. However, on the downsides, I think it would have 2 issues. One is that, depending on implementation, it could skirt a bit too close to the prescription on thinking machines in the lore. That's arguably one of the most important pieces of the lore, so it's important really not to contradict that. And secondly, it could reduce emergent gameplay, things that happen by chance, that would usually occur when you're building out in the world. To be fair, I don't think the latter is that bad. Most of the gameplay you run into while you're trying to build is Sardaukar, sandstorms and the sun, which, honestly to me, isn't that engaging of gameplay when you're just trying to design a build. Let me know what you think of the Solido Studio idea. I'll be honest, I don't think it's something funcom would implement, but you never know. Anyway, that will wrap us up for today. 5 things I think should be improved with Dune Awakening's build system. It's already off to a very solid start, but just a few tweaks could make it far more enjoyable to use. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on what could be improved with Dune Awakening's building system. I've tried to pull some things that I've seen on Reddit and Discord for this video. I am generally quite happy with the building system and how it functions. There are a couple of kinks to iron out with how certain pieces work, especially some of the more unique pieces in the faction-specific sets, and to be honest, the building menu itself can be quite cumbersome, though I think that's mostly a bigger impediment to new players. It's a little bit messy, but you get used to it over time. However, if you've ran into something that you think needs to be worked on more, do let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll be covering Dune Awakening right here on this channel alongside Conan Exiles, so make sure you subscribe to get the best of both Arrakis and Hyboria. A massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel yourself and get videos like this early, do check out the Patreon through the link in the description, and consider joining the ranks of the esteemed coffee cultists. Take care, and I'll see you soon.